In chapter 2, the seeds of rebellion planted by Old Major's speech in the previous chapter begin to germinate. Right. Following Old Major's death, the pigs, as the most intelligent of the animals, take charge of organizing and preparing for the rebellion. Primary leaders are two pigs, Napoleon and Snowball. They, along with a persuasive pig named Squealer, begin to spread Old Major's ideas about animalism. The animals are initially hesitant to accept this new ideology, but over time, they become more open to the vision of a better life. The rebellion occurs almost accidentally. Mr. Jones, the farmer, falls into a drunken stupor and neglects to feed the animals for a long time. Starving and desperate, the animals eventually rise up, motivated by hunger rather than any grand plan. That's important, we'll come back to it. They break into the storage shed and start helping themselves to food. When Mr. Jones and the men try to stop them, the animals turn on them and drive the humans off the farm in a spontaneous act of rebellion. The animals take over Manor Farm and almost immediately rename it Animal Farm to reflect their newfound independence. With the humans no longer present, the animals quickly seize control of the farm. The pigs, being the most intelligent, take on the role of leaders. They establish a set of guiding principles called 7 Commandments, which are written on the barn wall. These commandments are intended to serve as the foundation for the new animal society, with the most important being all animals are equal. However, even in this early chapter, there are some subtle hints that equality may not be as simple as it appears, as we see the pigs quickly assert authority over the others. All right, so tell me your thoughts on this chapter before I dive any further into my analysis of it. What do you think, chapter 2?
So there is that remark of Squealer saying turn black into white, and that is evident of the fact that he is going to be the most persuasive. It is his persuasion is going to work like magic on the other animals who can't even discern how he is able to convince them.
And I've just found and highlighted that here. The other said of Squealer that he could turn black into white. Very interesting quote, one that we could actually add to our list of quotes to remember, because of course turning black into white is a very vivid piece of imagery. Black and white are opposites, so if someone can turn black into white, it simply means they're able to make any situation turn into something else, right? Yeah, he can convince anybody of anything. So very interesting line. And yes, more foreshadowing, because Squealer, as you just said, Vashti, will become the most persuasive speaker in this entire novel. He will be the mouthpiece of the leader, and he will be the one who is able to persuade, convince, to brainwash, spread the propaganda in a very effective way.
Also, and this is just from a local perspective, 90% of our government on either side, both opposition as well as the ruling government, are lawyers. So sometimes I wonder, if the lawyers are able to turn black into white most times. And it turns out that they are also government representatives too. If you allow them, they will turn black into white for you, and they turn out to be members of parliament and government as a respect.
Yeah, as I mentioned yesterday, it's really one of the core skills of politicians, and that extends to lawyers, government officials, anyone who needs to speak publicly and try to pass on some kind of idea or ideology or thought, try to convince someone of something or change people's minds. You need to be able to turn black into white, in a sense, right? Someone has a particular ideology. You have to be able to twist that ideology and form it into something that you believe or you want them to believe. Yeah, it's a very interesting start. I think this is where the novel really starts. In chapter 1, it's just the outline of what is to come. The dream seems kind of pure. But here in chapter 2, we start to see some little hints that things aren't going to go as planned necessarily. It's already a little bit ironic that even though one of the commandments says all animals are created equal, we see that the pigs are leading. So that already gives us a question of, okay, well, if these pigs are the ones who are on top, clearly they're the leaders, are the other animals equal to them, right? In every way, in every respect? And the answer is no, because if you're the one leading, if you're the one crafting the commandments, then you are able to enforce your own thoughts on the masses. Haley, you want to do some reading?
Sure. The work of teaching and organizing the others fell naturally upon the pigs, who were generally recognized as being the cleverest of animals. Significance. This quote shows the immediate assumption that the pigs are superior to the other animals. Even before the rebellion, it is fully established. It subtly hints at the unequal distribution of power that will come to dominate the new regime. The animals had destroyed everything that reminded them of Mr. Jones. Significance. This line underscores the animals' desire to completely erase the past and create a fresh start, free from human oppression. However, their efforts to destroy the past don't stop the inevitable corruption that will seep into their new society.
Thank you, Haley. Before I ask you to read two more quotes or just one more quote, what do you think of these quotations? And if there are other quotes that you might want to add to our list of quotes to remember from this chapter, we can talk about it.
The quote with the animals had destroyed everything that reminded them of Mr. Jones is ironic. It's a sense shadowing that everything they destroyed, they will eventually come to the position where they just build it right back up.
Right back. Yeah. So that's why I always say it's so interesting to know the end of a book while you're reading it, because so many things become acts of foreshadowing. Because we know that when you read a quote like this, oh man, that's so strange, because everything that reminded them of Mr. Jones, the pigs will embody all of that stuff in a few chapters. So isn't this irony? Yes, it is. So they're in this act of destroying, erasing Mr. Jones, while the pigs are slowly becoming Mr. Jones.
One of my classmates mentioned that there's a hierarchy that's occurring in Animal Farm, and I don't know who naturally appointed the pigs, but they kept pushing the line of how clever they are, and therefore by merit they should be the ones who should lead. They're I believe it's, what's the biblical reference? Moses is Moses, yeah, Moses, Red Sea kind of thing.
Yeah. And the hierarchy is very much tied to the level of education. Because the pigs were the ones who were able to quickly develop literacy, right? Maybe not at the very beginning, but they eventually learned how to read, which meant that they were predisposed to more critical thinking than the other animals. And so it kind of puts us in a precarious spot now as, academics, whether students or teachers, because there's some responsibility and burden tied to being educated, isn't there? When you're educated, persons kind of expect you to take the lead, persons expect you to act, to know more. If you're in a room and somebody know, oh yes, that guy's a teacher, that lady's a principal, they're probably going to rely on you if something happens and someone needs to take charge. If there's a doctor in the room or whatever the case is, persons are going to gravitate to you or look to you for leadership or for help or for assistance. And so it's really a matter of, naturally, the masses are going to lean on those who they find more capable. But then what do you as the capable person do with this responsibility? Well, what the pigs do is they push the line further and further, and they continue to underscore how valuable they are, how different they are from everybody else, how much their brains are different. Oh yeah, we are the ones who can read and think. We need to do these particular jobs. And so there's already that predisposition that sets them apart, that kind of natural selection kind of thing. But then they widen the gap as much as they can. They make it, let's say, worse. They exacerbate the difference between themselves and the other animals. because they enjoy being the leaders. They enjoy being the ones who know the most, the ones who can make the decision. They quickly recognize that their higher intelligence is a means by which they can exert power. And of course, Napoleon takes this to the extreme, but by the end. So yeah, the hierarchy, I think, is one that, whether in Animal Farm or in real life situations, even group work, you're in class, teacher assigns 5 random students to a group, a leader is going to emerge. Usually a leader emerges. And I'm not saying it's always the person who knows the most or is the most intelligent, but someone is going to kind of assume the role, whether or not it's a democratic decision. Someone's going to start, giving orders or start organizing tasks and stuff like that. And in this case, it so happened that the deciding factor was intelligence and, by extension, education. Who are the best thinkers?
So could it also indicate that they weaponized education and made sure that it was an education system that could not be learned by the lower animals?
Of course. Oh yeah. Yes.
That's to make sure that everybody learned that they, as I said, they weaponize education so that only the very brilliant, and that is still the system today. Students are left behind because they automatically say, well, this is the curriculum. This is how you're supposed to learn it. If you don't learn it, fine. You don't pass CA, fine. You just fall by the wayside, that kind of thing. And never find another way to educate these very people who are so essential for society. Just like the animals who didn't, quote unquote, learn.
Yeah. And even though education was more or less open access at the beginning, because, anyone could have tried and learned. I mean, there are several factors that led to the pigs being so high above everybody else. One was, let's just say, talent or predisposition. Some persons are just going to be more academically inclined if we're looking at school, for example. And that's natural, that's fine. Not everybody is going to have the same rate of learning. That's one thing. But another thing is, when the pigs noticed the power of reading, especially, literacy was like the most critical thing. They, as I said, weaponized this skill, and they ensured that nobody else would reach their level, right? And we can imagine how Napoleon would kind of gatekeep whatever it is the animals would need to climb up to the pigs' level. So because they want to maintain their position and their prominence, they wouldn't want, for example, Boxer to be able to read as well as they could read. They want Boxer to focus on pulling the stones and following orders. Yeah. So the education is weaponized. And imagine if all the animals were as bright as the pigs, Squealer wouldn't be able to manipulate them. They'd be able to see through everything Squealer says. So definitely the weaponization of education, specifically literacy, is a significant theme in this text. Usually we see education as a very positive force. That's why we go to school, that's why we learn and get degrees, because education is something that can create change in our lives and in society. But in this novel, we see education, we see the darker side to it, where those who are educated are able to use those who are not educated, to that level. They're able to manipulate them and just use them as tools and pawns. Very interesting how the pigs just kind of asserted themselves as the leaders. That definitely was in no small part related to how intelligent and educated they were. And we see how much time they spend, throughout the novel, actually, consuming the books, reading, drawing up plans. So they realized that this was the way forward. And reading is a very human skill, right? That's one of the main things that differentiates us from other animals. We are able to read and communicate at that higher level. And so the pigs were becoming more human-like, more Mr. Jones-like, the more literate they became. Yeah. And by being the ones with the words, the ones with the power of words, they were able to spew the original idea, right, of animalism. They were able to slowly shift the idea into something else without the other animals noticing the change. And we have to ask ourselves now, when we look at, real life, how much of what we believe, how much of what we think is history, how much of what we accept as doctrine and truth is just ideas shaped by those in power, shaped by those who have all the words and those who were able to, get their voices out. How much do we really know and understand in terms of fact and truth, and how much is twisted and changed and reshaped over time so that it becomes something that someone wants us to believe? Because the other animals, they were not able to notice that, but this wasn't what Old Major said. This wasn't what Old Major meant. With Squealer's persuasiveness, everything Squealer said started to make sense to them, even though to the readers, it's very obvious what's happening. So there's some dramatic irony because we, the readers, can recognize at every point where Squealer is saying something that contradicts the plan. But the animals were never quite able to recognize that in general. The other key quote here, critical quote, the 7 commandments. Haley, you still with us?
Yes, sir. 1. Whatever goes upon 2 legs is an enemy. 2. Whatever goes upon 4 legs or has wing is a friend. 3. No animal shall wear clothes. 4. No animal should sleep in a bed. 5. No animal shall drink alcohol. 6. No animal shall kill any other animal. 7. All animals are equal. Significance. These commandments are meant to guide the animals and protect them from being like their human oppressors. At first glance, the commandments seem straightforward and fair, but as the story progresses, we see that they are far from unalterable. The pigs, especially Napoleon, begin to slowly manipulate the commandments to suit their own needs, changing the wording and reinterpreting the laws whenever it benefits them. This gradual distortion of the commandments mirrors how totalitarian regimes often start with noble ideas, only to twist and exploit them as power becomes more centralized. The commandments represent the animal's desire for a society, but Orwell's use of them shows how easily laws can be manipulated to serve those in power.
Thank you. What do we think of the commandments? Very important lines here. What do we think of there being commandments in the first place? What does that tell us? Where else do we know of commandments having existed?
So the Bible?
Oh yeah. So what do you think do you think it's a coincidence? Do you think there's anything we can draw from that fact? We know of 10 commandments.
So I guess they're following it as a religion, almost.
Yeah, that's very true. Animalism becomes very religion-like in that it becomes a thing where it starts out as this, okay, this is the logical approach, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But then Napoleon becomes akin to God, to the animals, and they simply follow without thought at all. They follow, it becomes worse than religion, in my opinion, because with religion there is still some amount of thought. Why do you follow this? Why do you do this? But for some of us, but the animals eventually just follow. And so I think there's the inclusion of commandments to probably, I might be wrong, it's just my idea, to hint at that parallel, that this is almost like it becomes close to a cult, right? They follow Napoleon as if he's not even one of them. He's some kind of higher being or something, right? And then we have 7 commandments. Isn't that also a little bit suspicious? Or do you think I am reaching that?
So it's interesting that you would have made mention of Napoleon hosting himself as a leader, as akin to God, as you mentioned, and that you use the word cult, and it immediately brought to the analogy that animal farm is really still pretty applicable. Now, I know this is a little far back, but there was a time in Guyana when there was this gentleman called, what's his name, man? He had a cult. He bought a cult from the United States. He formed a cult in Guyana itself. And he killed everybody by drinking Kool-Aid. Yes. I'm trying to remember his name. Jim Jones was his name. And he akined himself to God. He pretended through his words that he was able to maneuver people to believe that he was God, that he could heal cancer and stuff like that. And when the FBI got into him and they were coming down on him just hours before they were going to capture him in Guyana, it turned out that he made everybody drink poison the Kool-Aid, killing everybody.
This was in Guyana?
Yes, it was.
I know about this case, but this was interesting. So this was much closer than I than I knew.
I believe it was in the 1970s that happened. And it's just that whenever I think about Animal Farm and I think about the authoritarian type of leaders who push this kind of commandments, it's applicable even now. And as I said, because of that incident in Guyana, I don't even know how at that point in time Burnham managed to let him get in, but he did, and he was given a large quantity of land. He was able to maneuver via his language, and he had moments when he showed people he was curing cancer by cutting out liver pieces and demonstrating to them, and the masses were gullible, just like these animals, poor thing, not to realize. And they couldn't get out. They could not get out. You see, when Squealer when he realizes Squealer is going to become a serious problem. No. Snowball is going to become a problem for him. He immediately discredits him, gets him out, and is ready to sick his dogs behind him. So it was the same kind of, sometimes you read Animal Farm and you just matching it up like a crossword puzzle. It's going to every single moment in that part of history itself. Jim Jones was wicked in every mole, and he was the Napoleon at that point in time.
I know about Jim Jones, but that was in Guyana, eh? Interesting. Yeah, that's one of the things that with these timeless novels, you're every time you read it, you're able to find more connections, more parallels. It's almost as if Orwell was writing with all of this in mind. But of course, we know it's our mind that's making these connections. Very interesting. So yeah, the inclusion of commandments and them being 7 commandments, and obviously these commandments, were from George Orwell's perspective, not necessarily the animals, inspired by the biblical commandments, right? The thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not blah blah blah. These are very similarly worded, right? No animal shall blah blah blah. No animal shall kill. So it's definitely setting up the idea that this is more than just a government. This is more than just a constitution. This is something that is connected to the animals' souls. They're gonna be selling their souls to whatever kind of leadership this is, right? Because these aren't laws, they're commandments. There's a fair bit of difference between laws and commandments, right? All right, let's just take a look at some themes. Some themes that we see in this chapter. 4 themes. Shia, you here, man? All right, take us through the themes, please, Shia.
Awesome. The growing influence of the pigs highlights the development of class distinctions on the farm. The pigs are already positioning themselves as the intellectual class, while the other animals struggle with basic concerns like food and comfort. The pig's ability to read and write creates a power imbalance, setting the stage for their future dominance. Language as power. As early as chapter 2, the pigs begin to use language to solidify their power. Squealer, in particular, is described as a brilliant orator who can turn black into white. With his persuasive wit, this theme of language as a tool of control is both and throughout the novel, and it begins here with the pig's use of rhetoric to sway the other animals. The way they carefully craft the 7 commandments, for example, is the first step in shaping the farm's ideology to suit their needs.
All right, the next 2, Shia.
Revolution and betrayal. While the rebellion is successful, there's a sense that not everything is as triumphant as it seems. The rapid consolidation of power by the pigs and the immediate assumption of leadership roles foreshadows the betrayal of revolution's ideal. Although the animals believe they've achieved freedom, the subtle clues in this chapter suggest that they may have merely traded one form of oppression for another. Corruption of power. Old Major's teaching up teachings are meant to inspire a just and fair society, but from the very start, signs of corruption emerge. Napoleon's handling of the milk suggests that the pigs are beginning to prioritize their own interests over those of the other animals. The rebellion's promise of equality starts to break down as power begins to concentrate among the pigs.
Class on power languages. Power, we've seen these even in chapter 1. So since the beginning, these have been themes: revolution and betrayal, and then corruption of power is like the new thing now. Power leading to corruption, or the power being corrupted. And then the consolidation of power. Danger arises when power is centralized, right? When power is concentrated, when one person or one small group has all the power, then that usually gives rise to corruption, and that's what we see happening with the pigs. Any other interesting themes we might be able to explore in this chapter? Yeah, that might be it in terms of the themes. And in terms of characters, again we have Napoleon Snowball, Squealer. Well, we have Molly and Moses now. We talked about Molly last chapter. Now we have Moses, a new character. An overlooked character, unfortunately. He's often overlooked, but I think he's pretty important, and he does tie into the commandments being commandments. There are a few hints that kind of converge on the same point. All right, who wants to read through the characters for us? David, you here, man? David.
Yes, sir.
All right, read for us, please.
Napoleon's early behavior suggests that he is ambitious and opportunistic. While he initially supports the rebellion, his actions, like taking the milk, indicate that he is already focused on consolidating power for himself. His leadership style contrasts with Snowball's more idealistic approach, foreshadowing future conflict between the two. Snowball emerges as a more enthusiastic and charismatic leader in this chapter. He immediately begins organizing the animals and forming committees, showing his belief in collective effort and education. However, his leadership style contrasts sharply with Napoleon's, setting the stage for future conflict between the two. Snowball's idealism is his strength, but it may also be his downfall, as he underestimates Napoleon's more manipulative tendencies. Squealer's role as the pig's mouthpiece is introduced in this chapter. Described as a persuasive speaker who can turn black into white, Squealer represents the use of propaganda to control the narrative. His skill with language makes him a crucial figure in maintaining the pig's control over the other animals, even when their actions start to contradict the ideals of animalism. Molly and Moses. Molly, with her focus on superficial luxuries like sugar and ribbons, symbolizes those who are reluctant to give up personal comforts for the sake of revolution. Moses, the raven, represents religion, which the pigs view as a distraction from their revolutionary cause. Both characters are indifferent to the pig's vision of the future, revealing different forms of resistance to change.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I think about Moses. Do we remember anything about Moses? Not a character we often talk about, but I think he's interesting. The raven. Raven, right? I think he's a raven.
When he mentioned the sugar candy mountain,
What do we think about that? Let me bring it up on screen. What do you think about Sugar Candy Mountain, Lily?
I think it's like a symbolism to like heaven, because I think it's like, yeah, when you die, so heaven, so it symbolizes heaven in that sort.
Yeah. The pigs had an even harder struggle to counteract the lies put about by Moses. And again, when you look at the names, more coincidences, Moses being a prominent biblical name. It's hard to say that these are all coincidences, right? At some point you have to give in. And then he's a raven. Raven is another biblical creature, right? When you look at Noah's Ark. So there's too much evidence piling up. It's becoming evidence now, right? It's not just subtle hints anymore. So there are definitely some religious undertones in the plot here, right? The pigs had an even harder struggle to counteract the lies put about by Moses, the tame raven. Moses was Mr. Jones's special pet. So Moses was already connected to the human world, was a spy and the talebearer. but he was also a clever talker. So he's giving snowballs from competition, right? He claimed to know of the existence of a mysterious country called Sugar Candy Mountain, to which all animals went when they died. It was situated somewhere up in the sky, a little distance beyond the clouds. In Sugar Candy Mountain, it was Sunday 7 days a week. Clover was in season all year round, and the lump sugar and linseed cake grew on the hedges. The animals hated Moses because he told tales and did no work, but some of them believed in Sugar Candy Mountain, and the pigs had to argue very hard to persuade them that there was no such. Very interesting, right? The inclusion of this evangelist in the novel. Where does he fit in? Where does Moses fit in when we think about real life, when we think about politics and society and history? Where do we fit Moses in? What kind of person is Moses?
So symbolically, a raven is supposed to represent things like any kind of ill, a sense of omen. Religion tends to like to bring into sharp contrast, the way if we don't follow things, we bring hell and fire upon ourselves, kind of thing. I think that Moses, his name says one thing, but he is also he's also making analogies to the fact that I can prophesy certain things. I can tell you things that the pigs cannot possibly know. So that puts him that is Orwell suggesting that religion itself has a way of throwing manipulation at you. And you need to be careful and beware of them also when it comes to them throwing things at you. There are, again, I'm sorry, I have to bring up Jim Jones again. He was really good at this. He was like, this is what's going to happen when you get to heaven. And when you come to Guyana, you're going to have an abundance of this and an abundance of that. And there was this Sunday, 7 days a week moment that he kept pushing on them. And of course, Sugar Candy Mountain there, because as I said, he takes the role of this prophet, but he's an ill prophet. He's doing prophecies. Maybe he's suggesting that, whatever the pigs are going for is going to end up to be something truly controversial, causing death in the end.
And I guess on that point, he wouldn't be wrong necessarily. He's an interesting character. I wonder if he's kind of suggesting the idea, Orwell is suggesting an idea through him that religion is just which one of those philosophers? Was it Marx? I don't know. Said that religion is the opium of the people. I'm wondering if the idea is religion is simply it's like a drug. It's the easy way out of this tough reality. No need to face reality and fight and rebel and struggle. Just look up to the skies and be taken away by these thoughts, right? Is it that Moses is trying to quell the rebellious spirit by saying, hey, don't rebel. Nothing we do here really matters on this earth, on this farm. Let us go to the island in the sky, right? Let us go to that land in the sky. And that might be a way to escape this kind of reality without doing the hard work of actually rebelling and, working and blah, blah, blah. Old Major's way is one of very hard work. You said that basically there will be difficulties before we reach that utopia. But Moses is saying we can skip all of that difficulty and just arrive at the utopia, right? I don't know how he planned on getting the animals to Sugar Candy Mountain. I don't remember if he had any details of how to get there, but he was definitely selling that dream, right? And what I found interesting, I found it surprising, even in a second read, I found it very surprising that the pigs didn't partner up with Moses. How could they let that chance slip by? If the pigs were even a little bit craftier, they would have realized that, well, Moses is selling the idea or an idea that is anti-rebellion. Because if we're looking forward to the place in the sky, no need to rebel, no. So the pigs, I think, missed an opportunity of really allowing Moses to spread his ideology. Because then the animals, eventually when they start to, when the oppression kicks in, they wouldn't need to worry about their pension and their plot of land. And Boxer wouldn't be so concerned with the, whatever he would get and whenever he would retire. They would just all believe that in the end they will die and go to the sugar candy mountain. And so they wouldn't have any real reason to resist the pigs. So I think that was a missed opportunity, which, because they didn't take that chance, I really wondered if Napoleon was so evil at the outset, or is it that over time, his hunger for power grew? Because I think the Napoleon at the end of this novel, as far gone as that Napoleon was, if that was the Napoleon that encountered Moses, he would probably use Moses as another manipulative tool, the same way he used Snowball. So Moses, for me, is a very interesting character with a lot of questions around him, around what he means, what he symbolizes, how the pigs interacted with him, or the other animals interacted with him, and the stories. Very interesting character that we should give some thought. Yeah, Moses the raven preaching, and he was quite persuasive too, because the pigs had to argue very hard to counteract Moses. So he had a talent maybe second only to squealers, maybe even equal to squealers in terms of the persuasive. It's just that Squealer had the backing of the pig. I find him to be untrue. By death, they'd get to Sugar Candy Mountain to just take the good with the bad and wait for death and as relief. Well, religion has been used to pacify, to kind of take them away from the struggle that they're currently in, take them out of the fight that they're currently in. Interesting. Orwell might be saying that, yes, education can lead to people having manipulative power over us, but also religion might be similarly dangerous. Certain kinds of teachings might be dangerous. That might be a message, one that we can consider.
Sir, you hearing me?
Yes, Chantal, hearing you.
Could it have been like the pigs didn't want to use Moses because they probably believed that he would have like more power over them since he was a king, and because he was so close with Mr. Jones, the pig didn't want that to be their leader. They didn't want to be looking up to a raid.
Yeah, that makes sense, because the pigs did their best to consolidate and keep all the power to themselves. So that might have just been it. Could just be the fear that if we support this raven, he's gonna overtake us. Yeah, good point. We have some narrative devices used in chapter 2. We have some irony, right? While the animals celebrate their newfound freedom and equality, pigs are already beginning to assert their dominance. The renaming of the farm and the establishment of the 7 commandments seem to promise a fresh start, but the subtle signs of inequality show that not all animals are as equal as they believe. We have some ironies there. We have more foreshadowing. Chapter 2 is filled with subtle foreshadowing of the power struggles to come. Napoleon's disinterest in Snowball's committees and his focus on educating the young suggests that he has a long-term plan for leadership. The animals' unquestioning acceptance of the pig's leadership also foreshadows how easily they will be manipulated in the future. And we have some symbolism. The destruction of the objects associated with Mr. Jones, such as the whips and ribbons, symbolizes the rejection, right? The animal's rejection of human oppression. However, the burning of Boxer's straw hat, which had practical value, represents the dangers of rigid adherence to ideology without room for nuance or practicality. So this is an important one. They burned Boxer's straw hat because it's a hat, which is a human thing. But that straw hat was actually useful. So there might be some danger in just following rules wholesale with no room for evaluating anything case by case, right? We just accept it and follow it. That might be dangerous.